The heat of the Sahel hung heavy over Ouagadougou that day. The air shimmered above the sun-baked streets, and the murmurs of the crowd, gathering near the presidential palace, grew louder with every passing minute. It was not an ordinary day. The news had spread quickly. President Ibrahim Traoré had received a call from former U.S. President Donald Trump. The conversation, though private, had set in motion a political storm. Inside the palace, the air was cooler, but the tension was thick. In the main hall, Traoré sat at a long wooden table, his closest advisors around him. Papers, reports, and intelligence briefings lay scattered, but all eyes were fixed on him. He was calm, almost still, his gaze focused as if weighing every word he would soon say. "This is not just about a phone call," he finally said, his voice steady. "It's about who we are and what we will be." That evening, he stepped outside to address the nation. The courtyard was packed: ministers, soldiers, students, elders, and journalists from around the world. The national flag swayed above the podium, catching the last rays of the setting sun. He began without hesitation. "Burkina Faso will walk its own path. We will not allow any power, no matter how great, to dictate our future. We respect every nation, but respect must be mutual. Our sovereignty is not negotiable." His words struck deep. The crowd responded with cheers, and the echo of their voices rolled through the streets. He went on to speak of unity. "We face challenges: terrorism, economic hardship, political pressure, but together, as Africans, we can overcome them. Regional cooperation is the key to our security. No foreign army will protect our land as fiercely as we will ourselves." News of his speech traveled fast. In New York, Paris, and London, headlines framed him as defiant, bold, even dangerous. In Bamako, Niamey, and Conakry, his words were celebrated. Leaders across West Africa exchanged messages of solidarity. The next morning, the presidential palace's strategy room came alive. Maps of the Sahel covered the walls, and intelligence officers briefed the president on the latest threats. One advisor slid a report across the table. "Mr. President," he said, "Western pressure will increase. Sanctions are being discussed." "Let them talk," Traoré replied. "We have survived worse. If there is a price to be paid for independence, we will pay it." The streets reflected the mood of the nation. Young people painted slogans on banners: "Africa for Africans," "Sovereignty above all." Women in colorful traditional fabrics marched alongside students and workers. The rhythm of drums carried the message far beyond Ouagadougou's city limits. But in Washington, the atmosphere was different. Trump's circle debated the right response. Some argued for soft diplomacy, others for tightening economic screws. An African policy advisor warned on television, "Applying pressure on leaders like Traoré could backfire. They have the love of their people." Meanwhile, in West Africa's other capitals, rallies grew larger. Niger's president declared on national television, "My brother Traoré's words have echoed through the heart of the Sahel. We stand with him." Still, danger loomed. Western media spoke of Burkina Faso heading down a dangerous path, and financial markets raised the country's risk ratings. Traoré listened to the reports without flinching. "This," he said quietly, "is the cost of freedom." Universities turned into spaces of debate and inspiration. Student unions organized forums to discuss Pan-Africanism and self-determination. Social media lit up with the hashtag #AfricanUnityNow. "We are the new generation of this continent," one student leader said. "President Traoré has shown us it is possible to break the last chains of colonialism." A secret regional security meeting took place in an undisclosed location. Mali, Niger, Guinea, and Burkina Faso's leaders gathered to plan joint action against terrorism. Traoré leaned over the map on the table. "This land is ours. We cannot hand our security over to others." Heads nodded around the room. In the weeks that followed, Burkina Faso's state television aired a special program about the speech, titled "Sovereignty, Not for Sale." The documentary ended with a shot of Traoré, looking straight into the camera. "For us, independence is like air, like water. We cannot live without it." Then came the night that would mark the story's end. The sun dipped low over Ouagadougou, casting the city in golden red. The main square was filled once again, but this time, it was not for protest or crisis, it was for celebration. In the center, a great fire blazed, surrounded by dancing women, drumming men, and children drawing the national flag in chalk on the pavement. Traoré walked slowly onto the stage, wearing a simple jacket adorned with traditional Burkina Faso patterns. The crowd erupted in cheers, but he raised his hand for quiet. This was not his night to speak first. An elderly village chief took the microphone. "Mr. President," he said, "these lands were watered with the blood of our ancestors. We know the value of freedom. We thank you for not letting our flag's shadow shrink." Then a young woman, a law student, stepped forward. "We young people are no longer just dreaming. We've begun building our future. This road will not be easy, but it will be ours." Only then did Traoré speak. His voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the square. "What I see here tonight is not rebellion. It is rebirth. We are the architects of our own destiny. No one can guard our home better than we can. Whatever happens tomorrow, we will stand together. Because we are Burkina Faso. Because we are Africa." The applause and chants rose like a wave. Above them, the first star appeared in the sky. Night fell, and the drums began again. As Traoré stepped down from the stage, he touched the folded note in his pocket, a letter from a 12-year-old. "Boy, never lower our flag." He smiled. That flag was no longer just cloth. It was the living will of a nation. And that night, the wind of the Sahel carried a message across the continent. Freedom grows when it is defended. The morning after the speech, Ouagadougou streets buzzed with renewed energy. Market stalls were alive with chatter about the president's words. From the small vendors selling millet, porridge to the students hurrying to their classes, everyone felt the weight of a new era dawning. The phrase "sovereignty is non-negotiable" was scrawled on walls and banners, echoed in conversations in homes and cafes. Inside the presidential palace, President Traoré convened an emergency, meeting with his closest advisors and military leaders. Reports came in of foreign naval activity off the West African coast. Intelligence suggested an increase in surveillance, and pressure from international powers. Uneasy with Burkina Faso's firm stance, "We must show unity and strength," Traoré said firmly. "Our independence is not just a right. It is a responsibility." The government initiated plans for a regional security alliance, reaching out to Mali and Niger to coordinate efforts against terrorism and external interference. Joint military exercises were scheduled under the banner Sahel Shield, symbolizing collective defense and resolve. Meanwhile, across the continent, the African Union called an extraordinary session. Debates were heated. Some leaders voiced caution, advocating diplomatic balance, while others, inspired by Traoré, pushed for a more assertive Pan-African position. The solidarity was palpable. Burkina Faso was no longer isolated. It was a beacon. The international press began to pay close attention. Some called Traoré reckless, others courageous. His defiance was reframed as a symbol of a new Africa that refuses to be a pawn. In global games, in universities, young activists organized forums and discussions. The youth were not only inspired by Traoré's speech, but were mobilizing to shape their future. In a packed auditorium, a young woman stood up during a panel discussion and declared, "We must control our narrative. We must own our media, our education, and our economy." That same day, a new satellite television channel, Voice of Africa, launched from Ouagadougou. It broadcast in multiple languages, sharing stories of African resilience and sovereignty, unfiltered by foreign perspectives. As tensions escalated, diplomatic communications between Burkina Faso and Western powers intensified. Offers of aid came with strings attached, which Traoré decisively refused. "Our partnerships must be equal," he told visiting delegations. "No more deals that treat Africa as a charity case." In the villages and towns, citizens formed local security committees to protect their communities from the growing threat of extremist groups. These committees also coordinated agricultural projects, education drives, and community health initiatives, emphasizing self-sufficiency. Young soldiers trained together in the Tri-border region of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger symbolizing a new era of regional military cooperation. Their joint exercises, widely covered by African media, were named Iron Bond, reflecting unbreakable unity. Meanwhile, African diasporas in Europe staged peaceful protests supporting Traoré's vision. In Paris, thousands marched under banners reading "Africa's children are free," demanding an end to neo-colonial interference. Economic initiatives followed. The Sahel Common Market Project was launched to facilitate trade, using local currencies, aiming to reduce dependency on foreign currencies and institutions. The introduction of a regional digital currency, the Sahel dinar, was announced with great fanfare, signaling a major step towards economic sovereignty. In a highly anticipated international conference, Traoré and Donald Trump found themselves sharing a stage. Their exchange was tense but respectful. Trump acknowledged Traoré's commitment to fighting terrorism, while Traoré insisted on cooperation grounded in mutual respect and sovereignty. Back home, Traoré kept a letter from a 12-year-old child in his pocket, a reminder of the hopes and trust of the youngest generation. The boy's simple words, "Never lower our flag," fueled his resolve. As the movement grew, African nations held conferences discussing self-governance, economic independence, and cultural pride. Inspired by Traoré, emerging leaders across the continent called for reforms and unity. Yet, the path was not without sacrifice. Economic sanctions hit Burkina Faso hard. Yet the people endured, chanting, "We may starve, but we will not bow." The story culminates in a vibrant New Year celebration in the Sahel, where drums echo freedom and hope. Traoré's final words to his people, "This year will be ours, because we don't just demand freedom. We live it," echo across the continent, sealing the legacy of an Africa that rises on its own terms. Days after the New Year celebration, the atmosphere in Ouagadougou was electric. The city streets pulsed with energy as the people embraced a renewed sense of purpose. Markets brimmed with local produce. Artisans displayed their crafts, and children attended schools, buzzing with new curricula emphasizing African history, languages, and innovation. President Traoré's government launched a sweeping educational reform aimed at decolonizing the curriculum. "We must teach our children who they truly are," he said in a televised address. Schools incorporated lessons on Pan-African heroes, indigenous cultures, and the struggles and triumphs of the continent. Meanwhile, in the corridors of power, plans unfolded for a continental infrastructure project, the Trans-Sahel Express. This railway would connect Burkina Faso with neighboring countries, facilitating trade and mobility, and symbolizing a physical bond reflecting political unity. Traoré was invited to speak at the African Union Summit. There, he presented a bold vision. "We must move from words to action. Sovereignty demands not just political independence but economic self-reliance, social justice, and cultural pride. We must harness our youth, our land, and our resources to build a future that belongs to Africa alone." His speech received standing ovations. Young leaders from across Africa pledged to take up his mantle, fueling a continent-wide wave of activism and reform. Internationally, reactions were mixed. Some foreign governments sought rapprochement, offering partnerships without strings. Others increased covert efforts to destabilize the progress. Yet, through it all, Traoré maintained a steady hand and clear vision. On the home front, the local security committees evolved into formal community defense groups, equipped with training and support. These groups worked alongside the national military to secure the borders and protect citizens from insurgent attacks. The Iron Bond military exercises expanded to include more countries, solidifying a regional defense pact unprecedented in West African history. In the media, Voice of Africa grew into a powerful network, broadcasting stories of resilience, culture, and development. It became a platform for sharing solutions and celebrating African success stories, countering decades of biased narratives. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the baobab trees, Traoré walked through the streets of Ouagadougou incognito. He stopped at a small cafe, where a group of students debated fiercely about the future of the continent. Their passion and knowledge filled him with hope. Later that night, at the palace, he penned a letter to the African youth. "You are the architects of tomorrow. Never forget that the strength of Africa lies in you, the dreamers." the doers, the brave. This letter would later be circulated widely across schools and universities. Despite the progress, the road was challenging. Economic sanctions led to shortages and hardships. But through community gardens, local markets, and mutual aid, the people endured. The phrase, "we may starve, but we will not bow," became a rallying cry. Amid growing international attention, Traoré was invited to participate in a global peace summit. There, he met world leaders, advocating for a new kind of diplomacy, one based on respect, equality, and partnership rather than dominance. His presence alone symbolized a new Africa rising, confident, united, and unapologetically sovereign. Back in Ouagadougou, the people celebrated another festival, this time marking a year since Traoré's decisive speech. Fireworks lit the night sky, and children sang the national anthem with fervor. Traoré addressed the crowd. "We have come far, but our journey continues. Together, we will build the Africa we deserve." As the festivities wound down, he stood alone on the palace balcony, looking over the city. The flag fluttered proudly in the night breeze. The wind seemed to whisper the promise of a brighter future. And so, Burkina Faso's story became a beacon, a testament to courage, resilience, and the unyielding quest for freedom. The Sahel's winds carried its message. Far beyond borders, freedom is not given. It is taken and defended with heart and soul. As the days went by, the streets of Ouagadougou took on the air of a festival. People were once again filled with hope. Markets overflowed with local products, and artisans proudly displayed the works of their hands and hearts. In schools, children were busy learning about African history, languages, and innovations. Under President Traoré's leadership, an education reform began. "We must teach our children their true identity," he declared on television. Curricula were renewed to focus on Pan-African heroes, local cultures, and the continent's struggles and achievements. At the same time, preparations were underway for a regional infrastructure project, the Trans-Sahel Express. This railway line would connect Burkina Faso with neighboring countries, boosting trade and mobility, and serving as a tangible symbol of political unity. Speaking at the African Union Summit, Traoré declared, "We must move from words to action. Sovereignty is not only political independence, it is economic self-reliance, social justice, and cultural pride. Using our youth, our lands, and our resources, we must build our own future." His speech was met with great applause. Young leaders from across the continent embraced his vision, and calls for reform and unity multiplied. On the international stage, reactions varied. Some countries sought to soften relations, while others worked behind the scenes to hinder progress. Yet Traoré maintained his resolute and patient stance. Within the country, security committees evolved into formal defense groups, working with the national army. They safeguarded the borders and protected the people from extremist attacks. The Iron Bond exercise expanded to include more countries, strengthening the regional defense pact. In the media sphere, the Voice of Africa channel grew, broadcasting stories of resilience, culture, and development from across the continent, breaking years of biased narratives. One evening, Traoré walked through the streets of Ouagadougou in secret. In a small cafe, young people were passionately debating the continent's future. Their passion and knowledge stirred a new sense of hope within him. That night at the palace, he wrote a letter to young Africans. "You are the architects of tomorrow. Our strength lies in you, in the dreamers, the doers, the brave." The letter was later read widely in schools and universities. Challenges were not absent. Economic embargoes brought shortages and hardship. Yet through community gardens, local markets, and solidarity, the people endured. The phrase, "We may go hungry, but we will not bow," echoed everywhere. With growing international interest, Traoré was invited to a global peace summit. There, he met with world leaders and advocated for a new form of diplomacy, one built on respect, equality, and partnership. His very presence symbolized a new Africa, confident, united, and unwilling to compromise its freedom. In Ouagadougou, the people celebrated the first anniversary of Traoré's historic speech with a grand festival. Under fireworks lighting up the sky, children sang the national anthem with pride. Addressing the crowd, Traoré said, We have come far, but our road is long. Together, we will build the Africa we deserve." As the celebrations ended, he stood alone on the palace balcony, gazing at the city. The flag waved proudly in the wind. The breeze seemed to whisper words of hope for the future. And so, the story of Burkina Faso became a symbol of courage, resilience, and the quest for freedom. The winds of the Sahel carried a message beyond borders to the continent. Freedom is not given. It is taken and protected with heart.